My dad called periods. Disgusting. Then my little brother destroyed him. I can still remember that day with a clarity that sometimes frightens me. The kind of clarity that doesn't just live in memory. It lingers, pressing against your chest like a heartbeat you can't ignore. That morning began like any other, with sunlight sneaking through the blinds, the faint smell of coffee from the kitchen, and my little brother's laughter echoing from the living room. But something was about to happen that would stick in my mind forever. Within the first minute of leaving the comfort of my bedroom, the ordinary world felt like it had shifted, subtle but undeniable, as if the air itself had changed its weight. I had no idea that a small, casual conversation could expose the fractures in my family and reveal the strength of my little brother in a way that even I hadn't anticipated. My dad, always the picture of machismo, had a way of making even the simplest things feel like tests of toughness. Emotions were weak, anything girly was disgusting, and talking about certain parts of life was forbidden. I had grown up learning to navigate around these unspoken rules, choosing silence over confrontation, knowing that even a hint of vulnerability could draw his sharp judgment. It was no secret he had wanted a son, someone to embody the strength he so proudly displayed. I, being the daughter, had learned early that my presence in his world was something to be tolerated rather than embraced. Conversations with him were brief, functional, and often laced with dismissal. Sharing the details of my life, my struggles, or even my achievements felt futile, as though I was speaking into a void that responded only with indifference. And yet, my little brother, the golden child, as he was often referred to, partly because he looked so much like our father and partly because he seemed to absorb admiration effortlessly, was different. He had a curiosity and a kindness that contrasted sharply with our father's rigidity. He asked questions that others would have avoided. He noticed things that others ignored. He had the courage to confront our father, not with aggression, but with the clarity and honesty that come naturally to someone untainted by pride or fear. That day, as I sat in the living room playing Fortnite with him, the memory of my father's dismissiveness was fresh in my mind, a wound that still throbbed from the many times I had tried to reach him and been cut off. We were absorbed in the game, controllers in hand, fingers moving with practiced precision. The room buzzed with the sound of digital explosions and our laughter at each minor victory. Then, suddenly, he paused the game, set the controller down, and looked at me with an intensity that immediately drew my attention. There was a seriousness in his eyes that made me put my controller aside. He asked, in that quiet, earnest tone, if he could ask me something a little unusual. I smiled, a mixture of curiosity and amusement, and nodded. He wanted to know about periods. The question hit me in an unexpected way. The world seemed to pause around me, the sounds of Fortnite fading into the background. I felt a wave of warmth, pride, perhaps, and relief that someone in my family wanted to understand. But I also felt a flash of anger, a frustration born from years of living under my father's shadow. He had always dismissed such topics as disgusting, something unfit for discussion in his presence. The memory of the countless times he had cut me off, when I had tried to speak about injuries, feelings, or health flashed vividly. I remembered last year when I had broken my leg playing soccer, and he had literally interrupted me mid-sentence with, "Ugh, I don't want to hear about your girly stuff." Sir, I had fractured my femur, I had thought. But his ears had been closed, his mind locked in its rigid world. And yet, here was my little brother, asking with sincerity and without fear. I took a breath and began to explain, carefully, deliberately. I told him that periods were different for everyone, that some people experienced intense cramps while others barely noticed. I described it as the body's way of performing a monthly reset, a process that brought both pain and hormones, a punishment for surviving another month without bearing a child. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the curiosity blending with empathy. He laughed softly when I added that chocolate was a reliable ally during such times. Always chocolate. I felt a surge of relief, a quiet joy, at the simplicity and authenticity of the moment. It was intimate, tender, and wholly human. But then, from another room, our father's voice shattered the bubble of safety we had built. "Hey, shut up. No one wants to hear about something so disgusting. It's not a man's place to know those things about a woman." My jaw literally dropped. The sound of his words was like a physical blow. My thoughts tumbled, a mixture of rage, disbelief, and the familiar ache of being dismissed and demeaned. I was about to respond, to challenge, to release the frustration that had been bottled for years. I could feel the tension building, my chest tightening, my hands clenching in readiness. I was prepared to launch into a tirade that I had rehearsed countless times in my mind. But then, something remarkable happened. My little brother looked up at him, steady and unwavering, and said, in a voice calm yet pointed, "No wonder Mom left." The house went silent. Not the kind of silence that fills a room when people are watching a TV show together, but the kind of silence that stops every thought, every breath, every heartbeat for a split second. The weight of truth, delivered so simply and yet so completely, hung in the air. My father turned and walked away, retreating as if he had been struck by an invisible force, a defeated NPC in the game of life. I was left in awe, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes as laughter bubbled uncontrollably from deep within me. The absurdity, the brilliance, and the justice of that moment collided in a way I had never experienced before. My little brother turned back to me with a grin, the same mischievous light in his eyes that had been there since we were kids. "So, chocolate, right?" he said. I laughed through my tears, nodding, and told him to make her a goodie bag. Include her favorite candy, maybe some fuzzy socks, just let her know she was seen, and that he saw her for who she was without treating her differently. In that moment, the contrast between him and our father was so clear that it filled me with a profound sense of hope. He might look like our dad, share his features, but his heart, his mind, and his empathy were entirely his own. The rest of that day blurred into an almost dreamlike sequence. We returned to our game, the sounds of digital battles now accompanied by a quiet joy that neither of us would forget. I reflected on the subtle power of kindness and understanding, and how courage sometimes does not roar, but speaks softly and decisively at the right moment. I thought about the patterns of my family, the inherited beliefs, and the potential for breaking cycles of judgment and toxicity. The memory of my father's reaction lingered, but it was now softened by the brilliance of my little brother's insight and the profound truth he had spoken in a single sentence. As the evening light dimmed, casting long shadows across the living room, I felt a quiet gratitude. Gratitude not just for my brother, but for the reminder that goodness can exist even in the places where rigidity and judgment dominate. That even within the confines of a household shaped by a narrow worldview, empathy and understanding could flourish. That the next generation could see beyond the limitations imposed by the previous one, and in doing so, offer a chance for change, for hope, and for compassion. I knew, as I watched him carefully assembling the little goodie bag, that moments like this were rare and precious. They carried weight far beyond their apparent simplicity. A question about something so often stigmatized, a willingness to understand, a quiet defiance against unfairness, all of it coalesced into a single, luminous instance of humanity. It was a lesson I would carry with me forever, a memory I would revisit whenever the past or the present threatened to cloud my understanding of what truly matters, seeing people for who they are, and treating them with respect and empathy. The day continued with a strange mixture of relief and lingering tension. Even after my little brother's words had silenced our father, the house still seemed to hold its breath, as if it were processing the weight of truth that had just been delivered. I felt my chest loosen slightly, but the memory of the constant dismissal, the countless moments when my own thoughts and feelings had been belittled, remained. It was a mixture of vindication and lingering sorrow, a bittersweet combination that only deepened the meaning of what had just occurred. Watching my little brother move about the living room, carefully placing chocolate bars, candy, and a pair of fuzzy socks into the small goodie bag he had decided to make, I felt a profound sense of admiration. Here was someone who could embody the curiosity and empathy I had always wished for in our family. He had witnessed years of my father's behavior, absorbed it, and yet chosen a path entirely his own. There was no cruelty in his actions, no desire to dominate or assert superiority, just understanding, care, and a quiet, unshakable sense of justice. It was awe-inspiring to see such clarity in someone so young, and it gave me hope that the patterns of judgment, dismissiveness, and toxicity could indeed be broken. As I observed him, I reflected on the many times our father had taught me indirectly what not to become. Rigid, emotionally closed, fearful of vulnerability, and incapable of understanding others' experiences. Those lessons had been harsh, and for years I had carried them silently, internalizing the message that my thoughts and feelings were less important than his sense of propriety. I remembered last year when I had broken my leg during a soccer game, and the frustration and indignity of being dismissed when I tried to explain my injury. The phrase, "I don't want to hear about your girly stuff," had echoed in my mind countless times, a cruel reminder of the imbalance in our household. But now, with my little brother standing as a counterpoint, I could see that the lessons I had learned were not destiny. They could be challenged, rewritten, and replaced with empathy and kindness. The act of making the goodie bag, small as it might have seemed, became emblematic of a larger truth. Life is full of moments that appear trivial on the surface, yet carry profound consequences. The way we choose to respond, the care and attention we invest in the lives of others, and the willingness to understand experiences outside our own, these are the measures of character. My little brother had, in one small act, demonstrated more wisdom and compassion than our father had in decades. And in doing so, he reminded me that hope persists even in the most unexpected places. I found myself smiling, a quiet, genuine expression that had not come so easily in years. There was laughter too, but it was different from the nervous or forced chuckles I sometimes allowed myself. This laughter came from relief, from recognition, and from the joy of witnessing integrity and empathy in action. The world suddenly felt slightly less rigid, slightly less harsh, and I could breathe more freely. My father's words, once so powerful and suffocating, had lost their weight in the presence of truth. My little brother had given voice to what was unspoken, and in doing so, had changed the atmosphere of our home. In the days that followed, I continued to reflect on that moment. It was more than a single incident, it was a turning point. Conversations that had once been fraught with tension could now be approached with a sense of clarity and calm. My little brother's courage had shown me that one does not need to be loud or aggressive to confront injustice or ignorance. Sometimes a simple, honest statement delivered at the right moment is enough to shift the balance, to remind those around us of the power of understanding and empathy. It was a lesson I carried into my own life, one that reshaped my approach to relationships, communication, and the importance of being seen and acknowledged. The memory of our father retreating to another room lingered, but it no longer brought anger or fear. Instead, It served as a reminder of human imperfection, of the ways in which upbringing, culture, and personal insecurities can shape behavior. His response was not malice, but ignorance and rigidity, and while those qualities can be harmful, they are not immutable. The contrast between him and my little brother illuminated a path forward, one guided by observation, reflection, and conscious choice. I realize that each of us has the ability to redefine the norms we inherit, to break cycles, and to choose empathy over judgment. In that same week, I found myself sharing the story quietly with friends and relatives, not to shame anyone, but to convey the significance of small acts of understanding. I described how my little brother had approached a topic often stigmatized and met with silence or derision, and how his courage had made a tangible difference. People listened, nodded, and reflected on their own experiences. In sharing this moment, I understood the broader truth it contained: that empathy, curiosity, and compassion are contagious, and that by demonstrating them, even in seemingly minor ways, we create ripples that extend far beyond the immediate moment. The goodie bag, once filled with chocolate and small tokens of care, became symbolic of a larger philosophy. It represented acknowledgement without judgment, understanding without condescension, and love expressed through action rather than words alone. My little brother's sensitivity and insight served as a powerful counterbalance to the rigid expectations I had grown up with, reminding me that even in families shaped by narrow definitions of masculinity and strength, there is room for change, growth, and hope. Over time, our household began to feel lighter. Conversations that might once have been avoided were approached with a new sense of possibility. I noticed small changes. My little brother speaking openly about experiences that might once have been considered private, the inclusion of empathy in daily interactions, and a subtle, unspoken understanding that it is not weakness to care or to inquire about the lives of others. The shift was not immediate, nor was it perfect, but it was real, meaningful, and inspiring. It reminded me that change often begins with a single act, a single courageous statement, or a simple gesture of kindness. Reflecting on all of this, I realized how much hope can reside in the young, in those willing to question inherited prejudices, and in those who act with integrity. My little brother had, without realizing it, become a guidepost, a living example of the values I aspire to uphold in my own life. The contrast between him and our father was stark, yet it was not a source of bitterness. Instead, it was a reminder of possibility, a testament to the resilience of empathy, and a beacon of optimism that, even in the most rigid circumstances, compassion and understanding can prevail. As I write these words now, I am struck by the simplicity and power of that moment. A question, a pause, a thoughtful response, and a small act of kindness. These were enough to shift the dynamics of an entire household. The laughter, the chocolate, the goodie bag, and the quiet observation of one sibling witnessing another's bravery. It all combined into a memory that will last a lifetime. It is a story I carry with me, not only as a reflection of my family, but as a lesson applicable to the broader world. That integrity, empathy, and courage manifest in the small, everyday choices we make, and that they hold the power to reshape relationships, heal wounds, and inspire hope. Ultimately, that day taught me more about life, family, and human decency than any lecture or formal lesson ever could. I understood that while rigid beliefs and outdated notions of masculinity may persist, they do not have to dictate our behavior. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. Sometimes, it delivers the simplest, most profound truth at precisely the right moment. And when it does, the impact can be transformative, not only for the one who speaks, but for everyone who witnesses it. So, as I remember that afternoon, I am filled with gratitude. For my little brother, for his insight, and for the reminder that goodness exists even where it seems most unlikely. I am grateful for the laughter that followed, for the small gestures that carried immense meaning, and for the realization that hope, compassion, and empathy can flourish in the most ordinary moments. And as I look forward, I carry with me the knowledge that every act of understanding, every kind question, and every moment of courage has the power to ripple outward, shaping the world in ways we may never fully realize. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Tale Hub for more stories that stay with you.